So we're glad you all could join us today. If you haven't yet, go ahead and tell us in the chat where you're from, where you're joining us from. I heard some people are in the range of the storms, the tornado. We got off to a fun start this morning. Let's see where else we have people. Southwest Virginia. Philip from Arizona, Somerton. I'm from Gilbert, Arizona, but right now I'm in Las Vegas. So I got to see the Eagles in concert last night, which was really fun. And I'm going to see Chicago tonight. So, all right, let's see. Knoxville, Tennessee, Flint, Michigan, another Virginia. What else do we have? Prince George's country, Central Maryland, San Diego, California, Oakland, Queens, Cleveland. Hi, Tyrone. It's good to see you again. Glendale, Arizona, another Arizona. Shannon, good to see you. Alberta, we have at least one Canadian here. Nebraska, Kansas. Oh, Kimberly saw the concert. It's an amazing concert. All right, in middle of nowhere, and we have two people from Kansas. Okay, so that is unique. All right, we're excited to have you guys be here today. We're going to make this 5 hours might seem like a long time on a Saturday. It is a high opportunity cost. But the day will fly by. We have lots of great resources to share with you. And we just want to meet you guys so we know where you're from now. We're going to practice using some of our Zoom reactions to learn a little bit more about you. So if you'll look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see there's a react button with a little heart. And if you click react, you'll see some different options, lots of fun options. So you choose the way that you want to react. But if you are, let's start with, do we have any elementary teachers in the room? Any elementary teachers? Go ahead and show us a reaction. We do have a couple. Okay. Do we have any middle school teachers that are with us today? Give us a reaction if you're a middle school teacher. Awesome. See a couple middle school, what looks like 4 of you, middle school teachers. How about high school teachers? High school teachers, lots of high school teachers. That's to be expected. Okay. Do we have any post-secondary teachers? Post-secondary teachers? Okay. Some of your high school and post-secondary. I teach at Mesa Community College in Arizona. That's my full-time gig. And let's see. Do we have any, if you don't teach a social studies class, give us a reaction. Teach something other than social studies. Okay, we have at least Amy. I saw a couple. Okay, there's some more. How about business? Do we have any business teachers in the business department? Sometimes economics is in business and sometimes it's in social studies. Okay, all right, nice to meet all of you. One last thing in the Zoom chat, I want you to share what you hope to get out of today's workshop. What's something you hope to get out of today's workshop? Engaging lessons, new simulations, materials, lesson ideas, hands-on activities, resources, gain extra knowledge, okay? Things you can take back to your classroom, things you can do with your economic electives, okay? How can you respond to tough questions about free markets? That is very timely. Lessons you can use with online students. Great news about that. All the lessons that we're doing today can also be done in a virtual setting, just like we're doing this activity, and they can be done in a face-to-face setting, and we'll explain both. But that is something that is helpful. Help me understand 2025 global and U.S. situation. Yes, I hope we all can gain some understanding. All right. Okay, nice to meet all of you. Thank you for being here today. I did teach high school. I spent 10 years teaching high school economics, and I've been teaching economics ever since at the community college level. And I've been working with the Foundation for Teaching Economics for 18 years now. And I love teaching. And I'm also a mom and a grandma, 3 cute little grandkids. So that's a little bit about me. I'll let Jamie introduce herself when she starts. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And this is the agenda that Debbie Davis shared with you. So you can see we're going to start with a couple activities. And I'm actually going to swap these first two. We're going to do maps and dots first, and then we'll do the poverty survey. And then we'll talk about, we have to get on the same page with some terms so that we can set the stage for the rest of the day. And then we'll take a little break. Jamie will talk about capitalism and economic freedom, and then we'll have a lunch break and we'll go from there. And our lunch break is just kind of an extended break, 30 minutes. I know it doesn't quite work out to be lunchtime for anybody because we're all in different time zones. But we will have a little extended break in case you need to go outside and see the sun or the wind or rain or whatever kind of weather you have. All right, this curriculum, Is Capitalism Good for the Poor, has been around. FTE, I'm just guessing, but I think this curriculum was published, not quite 20 years ago. It may be 15 years ago, but it's been around for a long time. And Jamie Wagner worked with, we got a grant from the Fraser Institute. So you'll see their logo in the bottom of my slides here, on the bottom right of the slides. The Fraser Institute is a think tank out of Canada because they wanted us to kind of be able to update some of that curriculum. And so that's what we've done. We've added some new lessons to the Is Capitalism Good for the Poor resources or lessons. And so today we're going to feature those new lessons. But then before the day is over, I'll show you where you can find the whole curriculum unit and different activities that are there. So we're going to start with a maps and dots activity. And to do that, I need everybody to connect to Kahoot, or not Kahoot. We're going to connect to PearDeck. And this is going to let you connect to my slides. So the slides will be interactive. So you're going to go to kahoot.it, or no, I'm sorry, that's Kahoot. We're going to go there in a minute. You're going to go to joinpd.com. PD stands for PearDeck. Joinpd.com. You can see it right here on the screen. And then you're going to enter this code that you see, and it'll pop you into the slides. You'll see my slides. We'll take a minute to get connected. I'm going to open up my chat again. And Debbie Davis put the code in the chat as well. You go to joinpd.com, enter KPVSHP. Team pairs victoriously switch hilarious pairs. We get pairs in there twice. All right, so I see 36 of you connected. Almost. That code will stay in the chat if you need it. And then it will also, notice I'm going to go ahead and close it on my screen here, but you'll see it in the top right corner of my screen. And now what you'll notice on your device, you can connect either on your computer or on your phone. If you're already connected on your computer and you want to free up space, you could also pull up your phone and connect that way. That might give you a little more screen space. But what you're going to see is this map of the world. And you're going to see some icons that are red and blue. And so some little pointers. And I want you to drag those pointers to the places with using the key along the top of my map. So I think yours are on the right side. Is that where you see the pointers? Do you see them on the right side of your screen? You're going to drag those pointers, the red ones, I want you to drag them to what you think are the 2 poorest countries in the world today. And then you're going to drag the 2 green pointers to the 2 countries with the greatest decrease in poverty in the last 20 years. And then you're going to take the 1 blue pointer, and I want you to drag it to a country that you think has seen the greatest increase in poverty in the last 10 years. I'm going to show your responses as they're coming in, as your pointers are coming in, showing up. We've got 38 out of 41 responses. Keep dragging those around. I still see some people in the Pacific Ocean and some people in we're all over in oceans. I know you're still dragging those. Retrade. Oh. Yeah, there are some places in the middle of the ocean. You're just gonna have to guess where those are. That's a good.
I can't get mine to drag.
Oh, I don't know if it's a phone, if it's easier on a phone or a computer.
Yeah, I can't get
I'm
mine.
on the phone.
I can't get mine to drag either. I'm not sure what
Okay.
I'm doing.
All right. When I ask some questions, some deep questions, you can just tell me in the Zoom chat where you would have put them.
If you're on your phone, try tapping it.
Tap it.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Thanks, Pamela.
When you tap it on a phone, it sometimes repeats the one that you previously did, though.
I've experienced that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I left and I'm trying to come back in on my iPad. Can you post somewhere
Code?
the code? Yeah.
Let me hide this response real quick. It's go to joinpd.com and the code is KPVSHP.
Yeah, keep moving.
Whoops. There we go. Okay. Back to show responses. Looks like we got a lot of responses on there. Okay, I just want to hear from some people. Feel free to unmute your microphone and speak up. You can also answer in the Zoom chat if you're more comfortable doing that. But think of this as a normal classroom, like we're in an in-person workshop, and you don't have to even raise your hand. You could just unmute and speak up. Let's hear about some places where you put your dot for the 2 poorest countries. I see quite a few here in the middle of Africa. So somebody that put a dot in Africa, tell me where you put it and why. Go ahead, Susan.
I did Lesotho, which I think traditionally has the lowest per capita income. And I think this year, because I did it with my geography class, I think this year it's what's there south of Rwanda? Capital's Gitega. I think it's sorry.
Is it
DRC?
Rwanda?
No, the little one, Bujumbura is in there. I'm sorry,
Burundi.
Burundi. I think it's Burundi. Burundi and Lesotho.
Okay. And why did you place them there, Susan? One you said you know from your geography class. How about the other one?
Are you asking me or somebody else?
You.
Oh, sorry. We just did an activity in my geography class looking at the PRB, Population Reference Bureau data for 2024. And I just remember that Burundi came up and we were all surprised because I hadn't seen it there before. I know it's close to the DRC and there's a lot of civil strife right now, especially on the eastern side of the DRC. That's all I know. Okay,
so you placed yours there based on some activities that you've run in your geography class and from some information you've heard about world news. Mark, where did you place yours?
I put mine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Okay. And why?
I had just done an economics elective on kind of developmental economics, and we were using a lot of the website Our World in Data. I just remember they kept coming in low. Warfare is also really bad for poverty. Yeah. And I know they've been at war with themselves and with surrounding countries for almost a generation now.
Okay. Mark, Oh no, we had Mark. Let's see, who else wants to talk about where they place theirs and why? For the red dots. 2 poorest countries.
I was looking for Yemen, but I didn't really see it. So I kind of put it in the Middle East there, but also Africa, DRC, Sudan area, and
Okay.
anything pretty much Sahel region.
Why Yemen?
They're a failed state. Pretty much, it's all you got the Houthis there, right? Supplied by Iran, so they're really not even a country.
And are these things you've heard in the news?
Yeah, but also we did geography. We finished up econ about a couple weeks ago. So we were talking about failed countries and Somalia, how they broke off, and now you have the new Somaliland. So that they look pretty good dealing with Ethiopia. I also I subscribe, which is a great newsletter, the Global Post, and so I get information, and it's only 2 pages about anything that's going on in the world, and I share with my students. So how Nicaragua's government, what they're doing now, they just had, pretty much a dictatorship with a husband and wife. I get stuff on DRC, Yemen, the whole world. So globalpost.com, and it's free for teachers.
Thank you for sharing that resource. How about we have some dots in South America and Central America. Who placed a dot there and why? It looks like we have some on Haiti and then some in South America. Who wants to share why they placed a dot there and why? Nobody?
So this is Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
I chose Venezuela because of its current conflicts. So I figured if the people are fighting, somebody's being neglected.
Okay. And you've heard about those conflicts. Have you heard about them in the news, social media?
Students.
Students. Okay. Where are you from, Richard?
Orlando.
Orlando. Yeah. You have a lot of Venezuelan
A lot of kids are coming over.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the ones who are coming over are the ones who can afford to come over.
That's right. The people who have remained in Venezuela are those who
Can't get out.
mostly can't afford to get out. Any others in South America? Like I see one in Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador. Anybody else want to share why they placed one in South America? We also have some in India. How about India? Haiti, thank you, Lawrence. He said Haiti is or Larry, it's kind of a failed state. Thank you, Sudan in chat. Anybody in India that placed one there and why you placed one there? Has anybody traveled to a place and that influenced why they put a dot where they did? You got to maybe see something firsthand.
This is Amy. I put India because I have a friend who just spent a month over there, and she was just amazed at how impoverished it was. So
Okay.
that's why I put that.
Yeah. And we know even when we talk about, averages, standards of living in a country, it definitely doesn't capture all of the people in that country, right? In India, there are wealthier, populations and communities, and there are very, very poor communities. Same kind of thing in China, same kind of thing in, any country. Okay, let's move to the green dots. These are the countries that you think have seen the greatest decrease in poverty in the last 20 years. There's a lot of dots in China. So somebody that placed a dot there, tell me why you placed a dot in China.
I can go.
Oh, go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, thanks. It's I did a Gapminder activity on GDP with
Okay.
my class just as a demo, and I happened to pick China as an example, and I noticed fit the last 20 years pretty nicely increase.
Okay. And you saw that in a Gapminder activity. We'll talk about Gapminder later today. Who else placed one in China and why? Mark.
I'm basing mine a lot on the book that Deirdre McCluskey wrote, Why Liberalism Works. That she outlined a whole lot about economic growth there and made a very compelling case.
Deirdre McCluskey is a famous economist, very well written. Another Bourgeois Virtues, I think, was another book she's well known for. So you read a book and that influenced that. Let's see. How about we have several dots in Europe? So somebody that placed a dot in Europe, Why did you place it there? Anybody want to share about why they placed a dot in Europe? Melissa, did you place one there or no? I thought I saw you raise your hand, but you might not have. Just say no. Okay.
I was going to do Estonia because I took a class with you.
Okay. We did talk about Estonia in the class about socialism. Yeah. And they have had a big increase out of poverty. Okay. And in the chat, I wanted to point out Adrian's comment about China and some things he knew about China, implementing some economic reforms. But like David said, haven't they also experienced economic stagnation? They definitely are not seeing the level of growth that they saw for 2 or 3 decades. So it has slowed down. Let's see. Brazil has several dots. Somebody that placed a green dot in Brazil, why did you place it there?
Well, for me, it was kind of a guess because I teach US history, so this is challenging my geographic abilities, but just feeling that Brazil has become more international in terms of who it reaches out to. It seems to be having much more trade, as well as like drawing people there to go for vacations and, celebrations. I just seem to see it in the news more.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the in country now, but it was a stab in the dark.
Yeah. And that reminds me of countries over here in Southeast Asia. So we have a lot of people that put dots in the Southeast Asia. It looks like Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam. Maybe that might be Cambodia where I see a dot. Anybody that placed a dot in Southeast Asia, tell me why you placed it there. A green dot.
Singapore is probably doing the best out of anybody, right? So.
Okay. And we see that, and you from where? Excuse me.
Well, same thing. I took a class with you. I did that socialism class, and then I bought the book on the prime minister there for 30 years, and I was researching their track system and their school. So I took from what I learned from you guys here at FTE, I kind of started researching on my own. So I had some tools for the students. I could really dive deep into it.
Okay. Heather, how about you?
Right. As I was considering democratization as well as industrialization, I went to the Vietnam and Cambodia area, just thinking that greater freedom brought more people to cities, not to flee, but to improve their lives.
Yeah. And like you, I've heard a lot of things about Vietnam. I've heard about a lot of people traveling to Vietnam for vacation. And so, that to me, that says there must be some economic growth happening there. But I don't have any, numbers to back that up, but it feels like Vietnam is really changing. Okay, let's look at, let's talk about the United States. I see some green and blue dots. So the green dot means they have the greatest decrease in poverty in the last 20 years. But there's also some blue dots in the US that would imply the greatest increase in poverty in the last 10 years. So whether you put either dot in the US, tell me why. Who wants to talk about why they placed a dot in the US? You can just unmute and speak up. Or put it in the chat if you really want to. Nobody wants to talk about the US? Do we have poverty in the United States? I see some heads nodding. Okay.
Hi, this is Sarah.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Sarah
Sarah.
Chandler. I chose the United States because of the economics around me and how I have seen people lose everything.
Okay. So it's a personal experience informed your
Right.
Good placement. Okay, thank you.
I chose parts of the US because I've noticed in the last, this could be wrong, but I've noticed in the last 10 to 20 years that the southern parts of the United States seem to be more economically robust than some of the areas like Detroit, Michigan, or New England. It seems, excuse me, it seems like there's been a trajectory of people moving. Like if you look at the electoral votes of Texas and things in Florida, they've gained so many. So while I agree that the United States absolutely does have pockets of economic prosperity, I sort of agree with the other student, the other person, the other teacher who kind of said there are pockets of poverty.
Yeah.
That's why I chose the US.
One thing I notice when I drive around Arizona is we have some small towns that are just stagnant, or they were booming towns and they've just kind of collapsed, and there's a lot of poverty that's left, and that's in rural areas, some of the more rural areas. But when you go to the cities, there's growth and building and, you know, expansion, and it feels very different. So, and that's just within my own state. Okay, I want to point out, I want to scroll back and see if I can find this comment. It was back in the beginning of the activity. It was really good. Let's see. Oh, a little past this. Okay, this Samantha said, this is a great intro activity. It could generate a lot of questions too, like how do they measure who is the poorest? How accurate is the data? What informal economic activity is happening, as well as a way to access prior knowledge or preconceptions about world regions. So this is actually an activity that we would do, you know, as kind of a KWL activity. I don't know if that term is still used in education today, but it was what the K stands for, what do we know? And then the W is what do we want to know? KW, and then after the activity, you revisit that and talk about what have we learned. And so this is kind of a way to talk about what do we know about poverty, and it brings up some questions. What do we want to know? And then at the end of today, we'll be able to talk about what we've learned about. And so, and also point out there's different things that inform our knowledge about poverty. You know, sometimes it's things, you know, surveys or newsletters that we read about, or things in the news. Nobody said TikTok here. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, my kids have gotten me on TikTok, and I enjoy watching TikTok, and there's teacher talk, and there's all geography talk, and, you know, and I love, you know, I learn all kinds of things about geography from you know, like these 3 people I follow who post cool things about geography all the time. And I, you know, when people say, well, how do you know that? Sometimes I'm like, oh, this thing I learned on TikTok, right? So nobody said that, but your students might bring that up. But social media, we might learn things from social media. We might hear things in the news. We might know things from our personal experience or places we've been, or like Sarah said, things that are happening around us. So this is a fun activity. A way that you could do this in person, we used to take big maps to workshops, and we hang up the map, and then you can get these little sticky dots, you know, like that are clear. You want to get the kind that are removable. They're kind of like the ones you would use at garage sales to put prices on things, like little circle dots, and they come in like red, yellow, green, and blue, I think are the colors in the pack. But you want to get the ones that say removable, because some of them, otherwise they're hard to peel off of your map to reuse for later. The one downside to that is you have to take those dots off of the map to reuse it for the next class. And so what I found is, even in in-person classes, I like using this online version, because it's cleaner, it's easier. And then with the next class, I'm just ready to go again. You could also project a map onto like a whiteboard, and then you could just have them use whiteboard markers to make a little mark or a little dot. And so there's several ways you could do this activity that are probably more practical than the old map and little sticky dots that we used to use. So, all right. So now we're going to take a minute to do a global poverty survey, and we're going to do this through Kahoot. So if you go ahead and pull up your phone, open up another web browser. And if your phone isn't handy, you can do another window on your computer, but you're going to go to kahoot.it. And then you're going to type in this game pin. You could also just scan this QR code that you see on my screen, That'll take you right there. And once you get in, it's going to ask for your name. So just keep it appropriate. Okay. Lots of people joining. Debbie Davis, when you get a chance, can you message me in the chat what time we're supposed to end? Even though I put up the agenda, I forgot to really pay attention to my stop time.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we got 34 people in. We'll give it just one more minute, then we'll start. I like the comment in the, now I know what to do with the big plastic map in the classroom, which I teach. I remember those old maps, the ones that we have be on rolls with lots of maps. Okay. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start the quiz. You can still join. We'll put the game pin, Debbie Davis put in the chat. So just scroll back, there's a link to Kahoot and the game pin is in the chat. But I'm gonna go ahead and start. And here is your first question. In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world's population living in extreme poverty has almost halved, almost doubled, or remained roughly the same. You earn points in this game by answering correctly and how quickly you answer. Okay, so 15 of you got it right. It has almost halved. And the majority, who didn't get it right said the opposite, that it has almost doubled. But extreme poverty in the last 20 years has almost been cut in half. We'll talk a little bit more about this after the quiz. Let me see if I can move this. There we go. All right, Mark is in the lead with Heather right behind. Since 1980, has the number of people in the world living in extreme poverty increased or decreased? The last question was about proportion. This is about the actual number. Hey, we were split on this one, 20 to 21, but the 21 of you actually got it right. It has decreased, so that not only has the proportion of people in extreme poverty decreased, but the actual number of people, even though the population of the world has been growing, the number has declined as well. All right, Robin took over the lead. Next question. Annual growth in the income of the bottom 40% of people this is in the world, has increased. Sorry, I have to, in how many of 91 countries that are monitored in recent years? This comes from a survey or a quiz that the World Bank put out. So of 91 countries, the correct answer is 74 of those. The people in the bottom 40%, their incomes have actually increased. All right, Heather's in the lead. Now Robin's second and Brianne is third. How many of the global poor face risks of flood? So Christian said he doesn't see the answer options on the shapes. They don't show you the answer options, just the color. You have to look on my screen for the answer options. Okay, we were split across the board on this one, but the correct answer is 132 million. So face risks of floods. That's of the world's poor. Those are all big numbers. All right, Heather's up there in the lead. But which region has the highest rate of extreme poverty? The Middle East and North Africa, South Asia, or Sub-Saharan Africa? Hey, most of you got this one correct. The answer is Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest region or rate of extreme poverty. All right, that didn't change our top leaders, but Canuck, whoever Canuck is in the lead. Oh, that must be our Canadian. Okay, what are the 3 major challenges to poverty reduction? Is it COVID-19, GDP, and agriculture, COVID-19, climate change and conflict, armed conflict, gender inequality, and migration? I should say this survey was done 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. Okay, but the answer is armed conflict, gender inequality, or no, I'm sorry, that's what most of you answered. The answer, because of the time that it was taken, was COVID-19, climate change, and conflict. So you were right about the conflict. And COVID-19, not as much of a concern anymore, but climate change and conflict are both remain challenges to global poverty. We did see a dip in our improvements to global poverty with COVID-19. All right, here we go. Question number 7. What percentage of the poor aged 15 and older have no schooling or only some basic education? Okay, our answers were split, but the answer is 70% actually. So even in poor countries, 70% of those that are 15 and older have no schooling or only some basic education. So it's 70%. You know, education is very much correlated with standard of living. All right, Heather is in the lead. This is your last chance to take the lead from her. Our last question. In which countries will the new poor be mainly located? This is based on World Bank data. The correct answer was India and Nigeria. And only 9 of you got that one correct. All right, let's see who stayed up on the leaderboard. Our Canadian Canuck in number third place. Brianne was second. Was it Heather? And Heather was number 1. Everybody give a round of applause for our leaderboard. Good job. Okay, we're gonna stop our Kahoot here. See how I get out of that. We'll come back to here. And so we're gonna define some terms because as you guys pointed out in the maps and dots activity we were doing, what do we mean when we say poor? How are we defining poor? These are important things if we want to talk about who are the poor and is capitalism good for the poor. So back on your PearDeck, when you're connected to my slides, you're able to write a response to this question. So how would you define poor? What does poor mean to you? And if you're not still connected to my PearDeck slides, or you want to put it in the Google or in the Zoom chat, you can do that as well. What does poor mean to you? I'm going to put them up, your answers up as you're typing. You don't have to submit. They'll just show up here as you're typing. Somebody said surviving on less than $5 a day. Limited access to food, healthcare, instability. Those who have less than $1 a day. Unable to meet basic needs beyond a low quality of life. Basic needs cannot be met. Lacking a living income. Let's see. do not have access to capital, can't afford food and house. I would define being poor as being unable to provide the necessities, food, shelter for yourself and your family. Okay, 10% of the average income, making less than $40 a week, lack of food and income, limited resources, deprived of food, shelter, water, healthcare, education, unable to provide food and medical care. Okay. And then some were some very technical definitions, like a certain number of guidelines according to the national guidelines, right? There's like, I know it's that it's defined by a government, you know, what does the government say? Okay, thank you for sharing those answers. And we have similar answers, it looks like, in the Zoom chat. So when we talk about poverty, there's two ways we can talk about poverty. One is what we call absolute poverty, and that is measured against some designated minimum threshold of material well-being. And that can be defined differently in different countries. We can also have a world definition of poverty. The incomes of the poor if they fall below that threshold, then we would say, you know, that they would be considered poor. So the current standard is $2.15 a day. That's set by the World Bank. Relative poverty, it means that you're poor compared to somebody else. So it's identified by comparing levels of material well-being experienced by individuals or groups, rather than comparing it against a standard. So they're poorer than, you know, this group is poorer than this group, as opposed to saying, here's, you know, a poverty level, and are you above or below that? Okay, that's relative poverty. So in 2023, there were 691 million people who lived in extreme poverty. That's below $2.15 a day. And that is defined by the World Bank. So my question to you is this absolute or relative poverty? You can answer on the PearDeck slide. If you're not connected to PearDeck, you can just put it in the Zoom chat. What do you think? Is talking about poverty this way, is that absolute poverty or relative poverty? Go ahead and show the responses that are coming in right now. More people are saying absolute poverty than relative poverty. So this would be an example of absolute poverty. We set a level, $2.15 a day. And if you are below that, it's poverty. If you're above that, it's not. Now that's extreme poverty. Now, there are different poverty lines in different countries. And so this would be the income per person per day. And I have Canada, the US, India, and China just listed as some examples. And in Canada, they actually have different poverty levels, but for each province. And so one example was $68.98. That's in Canadian dollars per day. The rest of these are US dollars. So in the United States, we define poverty as $41.26 a day. So if you make below that, that would be considered our poverty level. India defines it as 43 cents a day, and that's put in US dollars so that you know, we can interpret what that means. And the answer to which province that would be, I think that's pointing to what province is Toronto in? Is that Ontario? Thank you. Okay, so that's Ontario. And then in China, it's $2.30 a day. So you can see different poverty lines in different countries. So here's some other economic terminology that comes up. We use the word income, but what do we mean by income? We use the term wealth, talking about, you know, what does it mean when we say wealth? And GDP, gross domestic product, and per capita GDP. So when let me just make sure. Okay. So when we talk about income, like income of a nation, we often talk about it using this term called GDP, gross domestic product. Now, gross domestic product, I'll break that down in a minute, but it basically measures the value of the stuff that a country produces in a year. And another way to think about it is all the income that's earned by the owners of resources, like labor is a resource that I own and you all own. And so we add up the income that's made by all the owners of resources. And we come up with an average. And that's a way that we can talk about income of a nation. Wealth in economics, when we talk about wealth, we're talking about well-being. How well off are the citizens, and the people in that country. And then when we talk about GDP, we can also talk about it per capita, per person. So the word capita, like maybe you've heard of decapitate, capita, that word capita is Latin for head. So think about it per head. So per capita GDP is per person. We take that amount of stuff, the value of all the stuff that's produced in a country, and we divide it by per person in a country. Now, somebody in the chat asked about real versus nominal GDP. And that's really important because GDP, we're measuring the value of all the goods and services produced in an economy in a year. And there's two things that can make that number go up. One is we can actually produce more stuff. And that would imply that we're more productive as a nation, that we have more, stuff to go around. And when I say stuff, I'm not just talking about tangible material things. We're also talking about services. In fact, we produce more services than goods. And the other thing that can make that number go up is inflation. And that's just the prices just go up. We all know what inflation is. We're seeing it right now, right? We're paying more for bananas than we used to pay for bananas. The prices of everything across the board is going up on average. That's inflation. And so if GDP goes up, the number goes up just because of inflation, because the dollar value of all this stuff went up. That doesn't mean we're necessarily more productive as a nation. We could produce the exact amount of stuff, but the prices are just higher. And so GDP looks higher. Well, that doesn't tell us that we're really wealthier as a society. That just means prices are higher. And economists, we don't care about that increase that comes from prices. So we want to adjust for inflation. When we subtract out that inflation, that's what's called real GDP. So anytime you see the word real in economics, it means we've adjusted for inflation. So nominal GDP is just stated in current dollars. And I did check this last week, but I didn't recheck it this morning to commit it to memory. But I think our GDP is like 28 trillion. Does that sound right? If somebody can tell me in the chat how far off I am, or Jamie, if you've looked at it recently. And that's the value of everything that we produce. And that's just stated in nominal terms. Now, to find out how much our GDP has grown from, let's say, a year ago or 5 years ago, we would also compare how much inflation has happened. And then we could have real GDP. We could see how much has our GDP grown, taking out the increase that's just from prices. And then per capita, we would, thank you, Lawrence, I was close. It's 27.7, so almost 28 trillion. Actually, that was 23, he said. So we might be 28, over 28 for now. You'll see real GDP per capita. That means we've just adjusted per capita GDP for inflation as well. Any questions about this number? About GDP and measures? And so this is, we do use this number to measure wealth of countries or standard of living. Different countries have different GDPs. The United States has the largest GDP in the world, but largest GDP in the world. They have a very large GDP, but when you divide the GDP of China per person, they have a lot more people than we do. And so the GDP per capita is much smaller in China than it is in the United States, the GDP per capita there. And so dividing it per person gives us a better indicator of the standard of living of individuals in that country. Drawbacks to this are that it's just an average. It doesn't capture those pockets of poverty or those places where there's incredible wealth. It doesn't capture the extremes. It just captures the average. So this visual right here is taken from a website that's already been brought up called gapminder.org. And they have this resource, this map, and I'm going to actually take you there just to show you what you can choose to put on the axes. Jamie, stop me if you're going to be doing this.
No, you're good.
Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to animating the data, and you'll see where that map came from. And notice they have life expectancy over here on the left, and they have GDP per capita, which is another way of saying income of people in the nation, the average income. And we can play this over time. If I push this play button here, we can go back to the year 1800, and these bubbles are the countries. You can highlight over the countries and see, and the color is the region of the world they're in. So here's the yellow, you can see is Europe. Here's a green one, that's North America. Here's blue. You can see those are African countries. And you can see these flying around. Green is North and South America. But notice as we're into the 1900s, you're seeing everybody is living longer, and we're moving to the right. Incomes are going up. Okay, thank you, Jamie. And now we can compare this. We can change it instead of life expectancy. I can change this to lots of other indicators. So somebody give me an indicator that you think is a good indicator of how well off people are in a country. Just name something. What else do you look at besides GDP to see how well off are the people in a country?
Longevity.
Like how long they live? Okay, and that's the one we have on this graph here. That's lifespan, life expectancy. What else might we look at?
Sorry.
Education, healthcare, somebody said, infant mortality. And what do we expect with something like infant mortality? Do you think it would be higher or lower with higher standards of living?
In the US, it doesn't, it's contradictory.
It is. We have, yes, for some interesting reasons. We have a lot more, overall though, let's go back to overall, well, then we could talk about why the US stands out. But overall, the wealthier the country is, the lower the infant mortality rate. That means the fewer deaths for infants when they're born. We bring a lot of births to, children are able to be born live, and then they might not make it because of complications, but they might be born very, very early. And for reasons like that, we're kind of contradictory. But I can change this indicator from life expectancy to, we could find on here mortality rates. Somebody else put education levels. We could change it to education levels. And somebody else mentioned health. There's all kinds of health indicators on here. Here's number of child deaths. We could look at, HIV. Here's nutrition. Let's pick a nutrition one. Food supply, how many calories people consume a day. And we can play that over time as well. And you can see the same kind of trends. So even though GDP isn't a perfect measure, it does correlate with a lot of these most of these other indicators of economic well-being. And so this is just a great resource. Jamie will talk a little bit more about that later today. Let me go back to here. Now, revisiting some of our poll questions in that survey, this is a graph that shows the extreme poverty rate from 1800 to almost today. And you can see that it's not this isn't a new thing. Poverty rates have been falling, but they've been falling even faster, especially since 1980. And it's expected, that we could, they've set goals that we would have this number down to 3%, for example, in the near future. Now, it's that question that I asked you guys in the last 20 years, the proportion of the world living in extreme poverty, and the answer was, has it doubled? Has it almost halved? Or has it stayed the same? This is information on people who answered that question by country, showing how many people answered it correctly. And so you can see, here's the United States. 5% of people answered it correctly. 36% of people said remained about the same. And 59% of people said that it almost doubled. And so this isn't something, and this is around the world. Norway was the most correct. But what's funny, Norway, 25% of the population got the answer right. But if you look down at the very bottom, chimps actually performed better than all of these people in these countries on that question. And they answered about a third, for each of those, which was more correct than the 25% in Norway. So this is something that is just we think we know, but actually the global knowledge out there about poverty and the state of poverty, we're not right on this. People are usually wrong. This answers the second question. And I think about world population, the number of the world population living in extreme poverty, and it was actually increasing. So this green is number of people not in extreme poverty, and the red is number of people in extreme poverty. And you can see that it was going up until about 1980. It has been falling, and we did see a spike during COVID, but it has since continued to fall. So why are we wrong? We'll visit, gapminder.org later to explore some of those questions and upgrade, your worldview. So I think, good, I'm just a couple minutes ahead, but are there any questions so far about these activities or the information that we've presented so far? Stephen brought up Hans Rosling. He wrote a book called Factfulness. It was actually the last book that he wrote, and I think his daughter finished it with him. And he passed away a few years ago. But he has a great video called, one of them's 200 Countries in 200 Years, which kind of shows the same thing I just played there. He actually was the founder of this gapminder.org. And Stephen said he has a video on how not to be ignorant of the world, right? That was kind of his area, was just helping upgrade people's knowledge about things. His field was global health, and he's Swedish. And he realized when he would present to different groups, even groups like doctors, and he would poll them on questions about their own field and the state of health, that they were about 20 years behind in their understanding. Like what they thought was the reality about the world around them was about 20 years out of date. And so he made it his goal to help people, use facts and to be more knowledgeable about things and the world around them. So any other questions or comments about this? Susan mentioned that she uses it in her maybe geography class. So, okay, well, I'm